Good morning. It's Dr. Rutledge, and I'm going to do a second of a two-part series. Maybe it might be a three-part series. And we're going to talk today about dopamine. Well, no, that's not that useful. We don't care about dopamine. Excuse me. What we care about is helping people fight the battle of becoming healthier. A lot of my patients are overweight, but even some of them who are not overweight are struggling to live a healthier lifestyle. And so the primary problem with that is that many of my suggestions to my patients of how to have a healthier lifestyle are not secrets. They're obvious, turn off the TV, exercise more, get some sleep, and eat healthy. So why would anybody need even to talk to me? Well, the interesting thing is that, as many of you who are listening probably know, is that those things are hard to do. And I want to talk about why they're hard and then give you some tricks to make them easier. And for that, that's worth listening to. So let me summarize again the primary conundrum, the mystery, the confusing part of this, which often leads to self-doubt, even self-hatred in some people, where people know what to do but can't do it. And so this is a brief recapitulation of our previous discussion, and I'll just say it again simply. Most people know what they should do, and the majority of people who contact me are profoundly upset, depressed, angry, critical of themselves in many cases, and argue that they are a bad person or a weak person or I can't do it. They are in the process of or considering giving up. And so I'd like to delve into that for a second, because there is a widespread opinion that when somebody fails to do what they know they should do, that they are bad, they are weak, they're just not a good person. So for example, if someone is a drug addict, one thing is we could be compassionate, but another thing is we could be in kind of an attack mode. We could say that person is a bad person. That person is a weak person. They need only one thing, which is backbone or character or strength. And so I want to talk about that idea. I want to say to you that I'm not sure that that's a good way to think about it, and it hurts you, and it doesn't match with what we know now of the research on these kinds of problems, that in fact, everything I just mentioned and more are all part of the same illness, the same problem, the same thing that's going on. So I want to talk about that thing, which is in our minds. Imagine that we know what to do. Imagine that we know exactly and precisely what to do, whether it's diet or narcotics or sleeping pills or exercise or whatever, yet we cannot do it. Why? And as we went over on the previous discussion, the best single explanation for all of those problems is clear and simple as can be. It relates to the chemical structure of the brain, particularly how the brain utilizes a chemical called dopamine and the dopaminergic pathways in the brain. In short, we have a variety of systems in our brain that make us enjoy things or stay away from things, make us want things or make us hate things. And that system includes particularly acute, sharp, powerful system, which is based on the chemical dopamine. Dopamine. So dopamine is a powerful chemical such that when we test animals and humans, when we do certain things which we know to be intensely pleasurable, dopamine levels go up. And when they go up, the person, the animal, is motivated to get that same experience again. I want that experience again. I'm going to get it again. And so that system is built in a certain way to drive us to do things like, for example, to eat, but not just to eat anything. It is also a very finely tuned system because it wants to eat some things more than others. We do need and do want to eat, but we also want other things, other chemicals that make this dopaminergic system turn on. So for example, narcotics. Narcotics are powerful activators of the dopaminergic system. So are other common addictive behaviors and drugs. So drugs, for example, would be nicotine in cigarettes, alcohol, cocaine, but also other behaviors. So we know now that television is addictive. We know that our cell phones and social media can be addictive. All of these things are powerfully damaging because not only do they produce joy, but they produce something else, which is they produce an attenuated effect over time. So when you give an animal sugar, salt, fat, wait a minute, I thought you were talking about narcotics. Here is the trick. It turns out that, in fact, drugs like narcotics and other chemicals affect the dopaminergic system exactly in the same way, and sometimes not as strongly as salt, sugar, and fat. And as I was saying, when those chemicals affect the dopaminergic system, it says, oh, I got this. I'm going to now turn down the sensitivity to that drug for several days, weeks, or even months. So that means if you want that same experience again, you need more. And so that experience is, if you know someone who became an alcoholic, the system of doing that, of becoming a worse and worse alcoholic, is a very simple system, unfortunately a very tragic system, wherein one drink leads to two, and two drinks lead to four, and many more like that. And so what we're saying is this is a tragic situation. As one drink leads to two, and two drinks to a bottle, and in some of my patients in India, 2 bottles of whiskey a day leads to devastating complications of severe alcoholism, including multiple organ system involvement and ultimately dementia and sometimes liver failure and death. Cocaine, narcotics in the same way can lead to progressive desire, need, demand for more drug. And as that increases, the side effects of high doses of narcotics worsen, and that can lead to deadly or devastating consequences. Think again of cigarettes. Cigarettes don't kill immediately, but there is a gradual progression of a need for greater and greater nicotine. And as the nicotine demand goes up, smoking goes up, and the side effects of cigarette smoking go up to including lung disease, lung cancer, and death. And we can go on to other forms of addiction. So social media has now been shown to be addicting. Television, we have known for the eye in the TV watching us, we need more and more television. And so that has been associated with an addictive effect on the body. And what we want to talk about now is that when these addictions occur, their drive, which is built in the brain, the motivation to do things is modified. It's bent, it's partially destroyed, leading the animal or the person in this case to do things that they don't intentionally really want. They do want it, but it's an interesting feature because it's a different part of the intellectual brain. And so when these things happen, now we're faced with the tragedy of seeing these kinds of addictions and complications throughout our society and now throughout the population of the entire Earth. And it turns out that when we test the brain of animals or people, we can actually see the dopaminergic pathways light up. There's a new technique called functional magnetic resonance imaging, and we can watch the various nerves in the brain light up. And we know now that when we give certain drugs, the brain dopaminergic pathways light up. Now, when they light up, good things could happen, but too much of a good thing leads to deadly consequences. And we also know something else in animals and people. We can watch this drive, this addiction, force or drive the animals to do things they would never do. Swim for long periods in cold water, accept an electric shock, even lead to self-damage because they want desperately the chemical feedback of dopamine in this system. Now, the part that we want to emphasize is that that same effect occurs with foods, but not all foods, but especially foods that have salt, sugar, and fat. So neither one is the one way. So we're not saying anything about keto or anything like that, but fat keto is bad. Fat keto is bad. Fat keto is bad. It leads to an addictive drug dopaminergic effect in the brain. Sugar, salt, all equal in their powerful effect on the brain. And they are damaging, and they lead to the situation where we humans do things that they would not normally do because they want that drug effect. Okay. Now, let's bring it back to our patients. The patients who call me are overweight. Maybe they've had weight loss surgery or maybe not. And now they're facing the struggle of what to do now. What can I do now? Because I'm overweight. Maybe I'm diabetic or short of breath or whatever. Now my relationships are harmed. I'm viewed negatively because the way I look is not in the standard of how we judge beauty. And so this becomes a terrible, depressing problem. And it turns out that you can never feed the addict enough, because after a short-term burst of good feeling, then things turn negative again. So you need to constantly go back to the drug dealer, in this case, to the chocolate, ice cream, hamburger, French fries, potato chips, or other foods like that to get your second, third, fourth, and fifth doses of the day of the narcotic equivalent of food. Now, what this sounds like is pretty terrible, because it's pretty terrible. People are stuck in this system. So now what we want to do is give you some tricks. And I'm going to tell you now, stop about all the dopamine stuff and forget it for a second and say, maybe there are some signs of what we could do. So I want to talk to you about a new drug, $10,000 drug, semaglutide. And semaglutide is a new drug just approved in February of last year. And what they wanted to do is, initially it's designed to help treat diabetes. But what they've shown is that also it can treat obesity. So what they found is this drug, when you give it to people in a large scale, multi-year, high quality, controlled prospective trial, those people who got the semaglutide lost on average over a year 15% of their body weight. So if you were 100 pounds weight, you'd lose 15 pounds. So take you down to 85. And if you were 200 pounds, it would take you down on average, some more and some less, it would take you down 30 pounds to say 170. So that's pretty good and that's pretty powerful, but it's also got a mild side effect in that it has a lot of side effects, but also it costs roughly $10,000 a year right now. So it's a little expensive. So, but we want to talk about this drug for a second because I have a trick. Okay, so this drug is very powerful. Well, what does it do? Well, it's actually also called a GLP1 agonist. A GLP1 agonist is a drug which causes GLP1 to go up. Enough said. No, okay. What's GLP1? GLP1 is a hormone in your body called glucagon-like peptide, and it's number one. And GLP1, it turns out, is very powerful. And when you give it to an animal or when it goes up in your bloodstream, you eat less. You say to yourself, I'm full. So that's how it works. Now, it also helps with insulin management and glucose management. So it helps treat diabetes. And that's how these drugs were initially marketed. But let's say this again. The magic wish of all of us is, I want a drug that will help me stop eating. We got one. Except it's $10,000 a year, but it is taking off and drug companies are paying for it, and it's great. And so one thing you could do is hang up now. You could shut the video off and just go get GLP-1 and pay the $10,000, or convince your doctor that you need a GLP-1 drug, and that's reasonable. So, but I'm not really going to talk much more about that now, because there are a lot of heavy people whose insurance company will not pay for that drug, but keep an eye out. P.S. If you decide you do want to buy it, I understand it's cheaper in Mexico, but I didn't say that. Anyways, it turns out now that I have another trick. Now that you know about GLP-1, wouldn't it be great if we knew a few other tricks that could increase GLP-1 and maybe give you a few more tricks to help you fight the battle against dopamine addiction from salt, sugar, and fat? Okay, now let's do an introduction again. What do we want to do if you're overweight and suffering from the side effects of being obese, such as diabetes and depression, heart disease, high blood pressure, things like that? Well, number one is eat healthy. I'm not going to go into that here. There's a lot of tips and tricks there, but basically we want to say that what you want to do is eat healthy, and what you're not doing is eating healthy. And so how can we get to that goal? Well, that's where the GLP-1 drugs come in. It turns out in your body, there are 3 powerful hormones that we know of that are very effective in decreasing cravings and hunger. And they are GLP-1, PYY, and amylin, AMYLIN. And each of these 3 hormones shut down an animal's desire to eat. And they do go up and down inside of our body. But what we'd like to do is say, is there a way that I can give you, which is a trick, to increase GLP-1 and maybe help in the battle to try and get away from the addiction of salt, sugar, and fatty foods? And so here's the answer. What we are suggesting is what you can do is we can give you a burst of GLP-1. All right, $10,000, just sending your money, sign below here. No, sorry. Anyway, so it's actually free. And in fact, I'll tell you the answer right now. It's oatmeal. Yep, it's just oatmeal, but not oatmeal. So we'll come back. So what we'd like to do now is go back and tell you a story about your microbiome. We'd like to tell you some stories about fiber in food, and then get finally back to increasing GLP-1, PYY, and amylin in the bloodstream. Because why? Because they interfere with the addictive qualities of salt, sugar, and fat. Sound good? Okay, so let's keep going. So now let's go back and say what we know now is a lot of our body's mechanism and desire to eat is controlled through our gut microbiome. That is the bacteria that live in our gut. And I don't have time to go through that a lot, but if you want to look that up, there's a lot of research on it. And basically what it shows is that the gut bacteria are really important in our life. And we're not going to talk about that too much now, but what we're going to say is the bacteria are part of the trick. So we want to sell you a free trick designed to help you fight the desire to eat junk food, which is mainly identified by salt, sugar, and fat. So we want to help you get better by affecting the microbiome. And you'll have to do some reading about this. It's pretty wild. We are filled with bacteria, and we can have inside of us either healthy bacteria or unhealthy bacteria. And so if we grow healthy bacteria, then good things happen to us. That's how they got their name, the healthy bacteria. And so we're going to talk about how to do that and then what happens and how it works. So first of all, I want to remind you of a fact that the whole earth is covered with living things. And the class of things that live on the earth are either animals or plants. And the difference between all the animals and all the plants is that the outer coating of the cell in animals is a very thin, flimsy lining called the cell membrane. On the other hand, the outer coating of all the cells that make up plants is a tough, rigid material called the cell wall. And you and I know it by another name. It's called cellulose. And we know it by another name. It's known as wood. So plants, all the cells of all the plants on Earth are surrounded by an outer coating, not a cell membrane, but a cell wall, which is wood. So all it is wood. And we also know that when we eat plants, that includes fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, all plants, when we eat them, we cannot digest wood. We're not cows. Okay, so when we eat plants, any kind of plant, we are eating wood and we can't digest it. Okay, now it turns out some plants have been processed. That is, they've been destroyed and turned into, say, for example, white flour. So you know that there's a difference between a wheat plant and a donut. Well, what happens is, of course, that the wheat has been ground, bleached, turned into white dust, added sugar and fat, and that makes a cake or a donut. Not good. On the other hand, the wheat as wheat berry or oats or steel cut oats are unprocessed. And in those cases, that cellulose, that wood is still intact. And you might say, well, so what? Because we can't digest wood. All fiber is valuable for is it just gives us normal bowel movements. Stay with me. There's a trick coming. What we know now is that when we eat that wood, it goes into the stomach, has many benefits. It fills you up. It's good for the gut. It helps interfere with and prevent bile reflux. A lot of surgeons and patients are not aware of this for some reason. And it has a lot of good features that we're not going to talk about. But when you eat wood or fiber, it goes down through the gut. Okay, it can't be digested. You can't digest fiber. Our body can't digest fiber. Then it gets down to the lower part of the gut and the colon, and that's where bacteria lives. And again, you can have two kinds of bacteria. One are meat, egg, and dairy eating bacteria. And when they see the wood, they got nothing to do with that. They can't really digest it. On the other hand, the good bacteria, the ones that we like, the ones we're talking about today, they start to grow when they see wood because they are wood eaters, are also called fiber feeders, bacteria that can eat wood. Stay with me. If we can get bacteria in our gut, which won't happen right away, you have to eat healthy first. But once you start growing healthy, once you start eating healthy food, you grow healthy bacteria, and then these bacteria can actually chew up and eat the fiber. So what? Because when you have bacteria that eat the fiber, when they eat it, when they're finished with the fiber molecule, they release waste product from eating the fiber. And the waste product is called short chain fatty acids. Write this down and look it up. They release short chain fatty acids called butyrate, acetate, and propionate into the lumen, the inside of the colon. And from there, these are small molecules, so they will diffuse across the lining of the colon, and they do all kinds of things to make you healthy in your bloodstream, including going to the brain and also releasing GLP1, PYY, and amylin. Okay? So if you eat oatmeal, fiber goes in, you can't digest it, goes down to the colon, and after several days or several weeks, you grow new healthy bacteria. The healthy bacteria can metabolize, chew up, eat the undigestible fiber. The undigestible fiber releases its own waste products called short-chain fatty acids. They go into the bloodstream, and then they release the magical drug that costs $10,000 a year that will cause 15% of your weight loss for the cost of oatmeal. And not only is GLP-1 increased, but PYY and amylin are also increased. so that they will help. Look all this up, make sure that I haven't tricked you anywhere, and then we'll do another series about some more tricks to help you on the way to getting better. Or you could spend $10,000 and get semaglutide, or you could do both. You could still have oatmeal and fiber for breakfast. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for our next video.